Okay, so now quite different. So talking about residual weed control, bare ground situations or situations where we've got some desirable perennial plants, but we want to stop germination of annuals and other weeds, which there may be seed in the soil, and we don't want those weeds to establish. So not much post-emergent activity with this one. Why is my slides not moving? Okay. So active ingredient, indaziflam, quite a unique mode of action for this type of use. It's a 500 gram per litre product, and we'll have a look at the registration, but sort of, again, those industrial type of situations can be used in areas where you've got grazing, so farm fence lines, that kind of situations, and some areas where you've got perennial grasses, as well as forestry, so pre-plant situations where we're establishing forestry trees. Water-based formulation, no smell, very use low rate, 150 mils per hectare, and 150 mils times a product that's 500 grams per litre tells you that it's 75 grams of active per hectare, so just extremely low rate of active ingredient going out per hectare. Group 29, so quite unique, and the Group 29s work on inhibiting cellulose production in the plant, and cellulose being the major component of cell walls. These are sometimes called cell wall biosynthesis inhibitors or cellulose biosynthesis inhibitor. Non-volatile, will, once sprayed, won't turn into a gaseous form and drift and cause any issues off-site. Quite UV stable, so it can be sprayed on bare ground situations like that railway track or a soil surface, sit there for several weeks until you get some rainfall events to move it into the soil and fix in the soil profile. Weed control, residual weed control, as I mentioned before, is difficult to quantify because it varies so much from situation to situation, but unusual if we don't see 8 months weed control with this, and I've certainly seen it go past 12 months in many situations. So yeah, long-term residual herbicide. Yeah, small group. The Group 29s, not many in that group, and none which are sort of in the fields where we're operating in. So indaziflam is in the soil, the weed seed germinates, and it's the roots that come out of that seed that will take up the indaziflam and then move through the plant and end up killing the plant. So as you can see in that photo, with increasing concentrations of indaziflam from left to right, there is just no root development. So sometimes you do see little shoots come to the surface, but when those plants have got no roots, they're not going to survive and they end up dying. So this video, we can see that there's seed. It looks like wheat seed in the soil. The left-hand side hasn't been sprayed. The one on the right, the surface of that soil has been sprayed with indaziflam and then watered in. So you can see as that seed germinates, we've just got no root system happening at all there, and the odd shoot may come to the surface. But when you've got plants like that, yeah, they're not gonna survive.
Had a situation, Yuri, where this might be useful for Sean and others potentially listening or watching later, where the applicator put Esplanade down with a glyph or a knockdown, I can't remember, and that inspired that seed bank to come through. And so I got a call saying, mate, product didn't do anything. So I went and visited the site, and as you were sort of alluding to, once the seed, it was ryegrass, had sort of exhausted its energy in the seed itself. It had a little bit of stem, a bit of grass coming out, but you could just flick it out with your foot. There was nothing putting down. So it had done its job, and in fact, I kind of argued that it had done twice the job because it had taken out what was there and then the next generation as well. So they'll still go to grow with a little bit of energy in the seed, but no, they won't sustain without any extra nutrients, moisture.
Yeah. Yeah, if you get called out to a situation where Dasaflam has been sprayed and there's weeds there, that is the first thing to do is to give those plants a tug test. And if they just come out of the soil with no root system, it's a clear case that Indazaflam's there. If they've got a big deep root system, then Indazaflam's not present, and then we figure out what's happened. But on site, it's the first thing to have a look at.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it needs to get to the soil. It does need to be activated by rain or soil moisture. And depending on the situation, if you've got a really bare ground situation, even a heavy dew or a couple of heavy dews is enough. You don't need several mils of rain. But yeah, you've got several weeks before that, before the moisture needs to occur, so it can sit there for 3 weeks. But yeah, it's a good idea to sort of time it before a rainfall event occurs. The factors that affect weed control are dependent on the soil and the weed. So yeah, soil texture, moisture, temperature. It's going to bind more tightly in heavier soils. Seed size will affect the weed control. So large seeded species are not going to be controlled as well as small seed species like annual grasses. Annual broadleaf weeds are extremely well controlled, but if we had larger seeds like acacias that you saw in that photo with the little pot trial I did with Method, those acacia seeds we're probably going to get 50% control or 40% control because that seed has just got enough reserves to push through and establish. Yeah, so we need to get the soil surface. So the amount of weed canopy, the amount of debris on the surface, anything that's going to prevent the spray getting to the soil surface will affect getting good coverage and weed control.
So that's something for us to discuss with the applicators to make sure they're putting enough water rate out in their scenario to get to soil, isn't it? So
yeah,
there's a bit of a variation on the label, but we're going to make sure it's getting there in their scenario, especially if it's residue they can't have moved or whatever.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, if we're in a bare ground situation like that railway track, we can go at fairly low water volumes because we're not going to have any trouble getting it to where it needs to be. But yeah, if we've got a lot of grass, thatch, dead leaves, bark, whatever may be on the surface, then we've got to be able to work through all that to get it to the soil surface with more water. So it binds, in the top part of the soil where the weed seeds are going to be. Talked about the root uptake. Post-emergent activity is very minimal. It's limited to the odd dicot plus C3 grasses. So our poa, fescue type of plants, across the species, we can see some control. Our lowliums, ryegrass, when they're small, but yeah, not much post-emergent activity. So yeah, if you've got established plants, you obviously need to mix it with appropriate herbicide to control those existing plants. Yep, covered all that. Yeah, so this is the type of situation. So we've got perennial plants like these. This is where our herbicide layer forms, where these red dots are. These perennial plants are going to survive quite happily, whereas weed seed in that zone which are those red dots. If those seeds germinate, then they're not going to survive, but the perennials will survive quite well. Why this is Esplanade 200 SC is because that's the formulation that's used in America. So yeah, this graphic's taken from an American brochure. The label. So the first part is our industrial type of situations. We want bare ground. So your railway tracks, roadsides, around infrastructure like guide posts, cable barriers, all those kinds of situations. Fairly straightforward with the label, 150 mils per hectare. And yeah, don't recommend sort of changing that rate. If it's a situation where people are not using boom spraying, then the rate is 30 mils per 100 litres of water. And then there's an annual limit. So annual limit is 300 mils per hectare. So that's, if people want total bare ground, then applying it every 6 months at that 150 mils will give you a sort of bare ground situation all year round. Yep. Then the bottom half of that table is the grassed areas. So this could be where we want to keep perennial grasses, like an airport, all those areas between runways, or some roadside situations. You won't affect those perennial grasses, but you'll stop other weeds from germinating in that grass. So the rates are again the same. But as mentioned before, the water rates probably need to increase in that situation, and the rainfall becomes much more critical to move the product into the soil. Oops, gone too far. And then we've got sort of these non-crop areas, so mining situations, yeah, other type of maybe more environmental type of situations where we're looking to control weeds, where we want to get desirable, I guess generally native vegetation established into those areas, natural areas. So yeah, it can be used in those situations. And then the bottom part of that table is the forestry recommendation. So the forestry covers pine trees, eucalypts, and African mahogany, which is grown in the northern part of Australia. With pine applications, it can be applied over the top. So you can plant your trees and then spray over the top, or you can spray it before the trees are planted into those planting rows. With eucalypts, you can only apply it before planting. You can get a leaf scorch on the eucalypts if you spray over the top. So we don't recommend planting and then spraying over the top. Generally, we didn't see the trees die, but in a forestry situation where growth and logging volume down the track becomes so important, even the setback at establishment can hinder how quickly you get to harvest. So yeah, we don't want to reduce that rotation time frame. So spraying over the top of eucalypts is not recommended. Weeds. Yeah, a lot of broadleaf weeds on the label, and a lot of grasses, sedges. There's a few sedges which grow from seeds, as well as some rushes. So they're all on the label, so it's fairly extensive. Compatibility. So the order of mixing. There's one situation we've come across where we can have an issue with compatibility, and that's with the high-loaded glyphosates. Then the recommendation is to put the glyphosate in last. So you can see an order here from 1 to 9. Esplanade's there at number 4, glyphosate at number 8. So yeah, if you put the Esplanade in first, followed by the glyphosate, then no problem. Whereas in the red here, the Roundup's gone in first and then the Esplanade, and yeah, we can have physical compatibility issues between the two of them. So quite important. Now, all the work I've done has been with 360 glyphosates, and I've never seen a problem. But yeah, once we get into these 540s and so forth, the high loaded glyphosates, there can be a problem. So just bear that in mind.
Yeah.
And we've mixed it with a whole heap of different things, and haven't seen any problems. So, and we're using 150 mils per hectare, so it's not a large volume of product that's going in there. A little bit of trial stuff, not as much as I had before with method, but we did some work in Adelaide with some resistant biotypes. So 3 weeds here: ryegrass on the left, fleabane in the middle, and feather top rhodes grass on the right, which collected by the University of Adelaide or Plant Science Consulting, who are based out of the University of Adelaide. So the ryegrass was resistant to 3 groups, and I should have numbers in there. We don't use letters anymore. So it should be 1, 2, and I can't remember 9. Yeah, 9. That's right. So yeah, Esplanade works quite well on those. So Esplanade treated pots compared with untreated. Fleabane resistant to glyphosate. Again, works well on those, and glyphosate resistant Rhodes grass. Again, works very well. So the other thing we looked at was the post-emergent activity on ryegrass. So this is the pre-emergent application on the ryegrass that was resistant to all those different mode of actions. So 100 mils, 150 mils works quite well compared with the untreated. We expanded that to look at ryegrass, which was 1 leaf stage at application, at 3 leaf stage, and then at 1 tiller. On the left, you can see here, well, if we just concentrate on the middle pot and the one on the right, because that's the Esplanade rates. 1 leaf ryegrass, post-emergent activity. Yep, it certainly controlled those. At 3 leaf stage, we've got a huge amount of suppression here, but there is a couple of green leaves there. Now, whether they die or not, I'm not quite sure, but they're certainly not really healthy. And even at 1 tiller stage, we've got significant suppression. But again, they haven't died. So, on things like ryegrass, wintergrass, bent grass, so forth, yeah, you can see some of this post-emergent activity in the field. And it can be quite significant suppression, but you wouldn't, on this big, well-established plants, you wouldn't say that it's good post-emergent control. So we sort of focus on the pre-emergent activity. Just a couple of graphs, some fence line trial work that was done up at Tamworth. A lot of treatments here, but Esplanade in the middle there, that red column. So this is the percentage of grass cover at 9 months after treatment. We've also got method there, so a little bit more grass cover, and this is that half rate that I mentioned when we're talking about method. And right on the right-hand side of this graph, you can see Esplanade, but method at 9 months, no grass cover at all. And when we look at broadleaf weeds, again, Esplanade under 10% broadleaf weed cover at 9 months. Method even less, because it has got that strong activity on dicots. And again, the two of them together, no zero broadleaf weed cover at 9 months.
Just ask a question on that.
Yep.
Was that knockdown or was that pre-emergent?
Pre-emergent. So before
Okay.
the wet season started. So these would have been late summer applications before we got into the autumn break.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thanks for that.
Bit knockdown. And some work I just did. So yeah, this is glyphosate plus Esplanade sprayed along this line here, compared with just glyphosate on the next panel, fence panel. So yeah, you can see that we've already got regrowth where we've only used glyphosate. Adding the Esplanade makes a big difference. And some work in Canberra, controlling weeds in these types of bare ground situations, where we maintain it totally clean for 6 months plus. And then around guideposts. So this is again glyphosate only, and this would have been about 6 months after application, compared with glyphosate plus Esplanade around that guidepost, and yeah, bare soil, nothing coming back. And yeah, roadside applications, glyphosate plus Esplanade. Top part of the photo treated, bottom photo not treated. So yeah, no recovery.
And a lot of good successful projects where they've stopped that encroachment onto the road so that people can park properly and pull over and that type of thing as well, Yuri. It's pretty important in areas.
Yeah, good point. Actually, yeah, depending how we go for time, yeah, I'll come back to that, Dale. That's a good point.
Sure. Yeah, no.
Some sort of bush regen environmental situations down in Victoria, and Dale, I think, has seen both of these. So yeah, Esplanade used in the left-hand side, bottom half of this photo was sprayed with Esplanade, trying to control this annual grass, which you can see the top half of the photo comes up and just chokes out all the natives. And again, in this photo on the right, and that native grassland where they're trying to control weeds, the plot in the middle was sprayed with Esplanade, and you can see all that cape weed that's germinated around it, plus some grasses, annual grasses, compared with what's been retained in that grassland with the use of Esplanade. So yeah, these are the kinds of situations, solar farms, fence lines, forestry situations, blue gums planted there in South Australia, I think this was. This time it was a mix of Esplanade plus sulfametron. So yeah, you can see how nice and clean that is. Good situation for the trees to grow and get away. And we've done quite a bit of pot work on other grasses which are not on the label yet, but things are looking positive. So some of these perennial grasses, which are a real problem, like buffel grass, Esplanade works well on. Giant Parramatta grass, again, works quite well on. Serrated tussock, Esplanade works well on. Chilean needlegrass. So yeah, we can't get the post-immersion control on these, but they will give you the pre-immersion control. African lovegrass, and then an annual grass, greater grass from Queensland. The top pot was treated with Esplanade. The bottom one's the untreated. So yeah, all those types of grasses it works well on as well.
So the potential there, Yuri, to be, scenarios where maybe they backburn and then apply, is that a sort of, and this try and exhaust the seed bank?
It will certainly help with that seed bank. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, as you know, it's just controlling those existing plants. That's the problem. So yeah, but certainly it will help with depleting that seed bank.
That's a pretty cool move. That'd be great to see them on label.
And this is the same set of pots I showed with the method, but this time with the Esplanade. So gorse here on the left, again 100% control. Acacia, as I said before, you get 40-50% control, so quite a few of those wattles, those acacias have come through the Esplanade and grown. The agapanthus, no, it didn't manage to germinate and grow. Well, it germinated, but didn't manage to establish a grow. And the grass seed, of course, didn't establish through that Esplanade. Cool. Again, the stewardship's online. So yeah, have a look at that. And yeah, the just a summary there of the Esplanade.